Hello there, everyone. My name is Crazy Caleb, and today we're going to be taking a look at Perceptron. Now, this module itself looks a little bit scary, and trust me, it's not as bad as you think it is. It's just basic math. And this manual is a lot of reading, which can scare a lot of people away, but trust me, it's not that bad. So, there's a little bit of a groundwork that we need to essentially establish with this module and how it actually works. So that's what the reading does. But for the most part, you are going to be using these last two bits right here. That is going to be all you simply use right here, and that's going to be what you're going to do with this. So let's get the alarm clock turned off real quick, and then we'll get right into this. So on this module, what we have here is a series of a bunch of different nodes currently present on the module, and we have a display up at the top. We have a series of 5 different buttons at the top of here, and 4 different on the bottom. Now, each of these guys do different things. These bottom ones essentially will be toggling the number of nodes at each of these blue spots in the range of 1 to 4. So as we can see right here, we can simply interact with it as freely as we want to, so on and so forth. The ones that we cannot interact with, though, are going to be the green ones at the far left, which can be in the range of 1 to 4, and the red ones over on the far right side, which can also be in the range of 1 to 4. These ones are guaranteed to be in these exact positions, and we cannot interact with them based off of the positions of the buttons at the bottom. That's not how this works. So let's get right into this. So what exactly is happening with this module? Perceptron is a neural network in which each node is connected to each node of the next layer. So as we can see for this example, this one little blue node is connected to all 4 of these individual blue nodes in the next layer, essentially. And if we happen to put 2 of them, each of them are essentially going to be connected to each of the nodes, and this connection goes up to 8 instead of 4. So for example, so in this case, we have 4 different connections right here, because we have the orange, the lime, the orange, and the orange. Note to self, the colors of the connections do not matter in this case. It's just simply going to be focusing on how many connections you actually have established, regardless of what the colors are. Because I believe the colors are random. I'm not quite sure if they are exactly perfect. But yeah, they keep changing every single time, so it just does not matter how they look. Yeah, so that one was green originally. So yeah, so these colors are completely random. So that's why I'm saying don't worry about them for the most part. But essentially what we want to do is we want to focus on the amount of connections that we have present. So in this case, we have 4. In this next one, we would have 8, because as we can see from this node itself, we have 4 different connections stemming out to the other 4 in the next layer. And from the bottom node here, we have 4 different connections stemming out to the other 4 in the next layer. That's how this works, and that's pretty straightforward what it asks you to do. And essentially, all you have to do is some multiplication with it, essentially. Likewise, with this first connection right here, we only have 2 connections, 1 to each of the connections in the next layer, and so on and so forth. Make sure you understand how that works, because that's going to be how most of this module, what all of this module is about right here. So, input nodes are shown in green, output nodes are shown in red, and all of the layers are called hidden. In this case, these are what the blues represent here. So, the upper display shows the required learning accuracy. Now, here's where we get into what we have to do with this module. So, we have the required learning accuracy at the top, which is going to be represented by 229, and the maximum training time in seconds of a 0.883. So, the accuracy will be checked after the full training of the perceptron. So even if the required learning accuracy is achieved in less than the maximum time, even if the required learning accuracy is achieved in less than the maximum available time, the solution will not be valid if the neural network's training time is more than the maximum allowed. This is very important. So, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So we have to at least achieve the maximum, learning accuracy, which in this case is the 229. We can have the ability to go over it. All we simply need to do is we need to make sure that we can get to it before this training time right here, before the 0.883 is reached. We want to make sure that we get to that. We should not be able to reach the 0.883. That's where this thing comes into play here. So this is essentially what we're going to be doing in this module, and there's going to be a series of different calculations and math that we have to do with this to calculate both the learning accuracy that we get from each of the individual connections of the nodes, and the training time that we get from each of the individual nodes themselves too. So let's take a look. So change the numbers of the nodes on the hidden layer, use the buttons at the bottom of the large display, so as we did right here, we can change this as free willy-nilly as we want. For information about the relationship between layers, this is where we get into some of the reads that we need to give. Hold down the buttons at the top of the large display. So let's do that. So now, if we hold down each of these buttons, we get presented with 2 additional numbers here for each of them individually. They will all be completely different, and they don't change at all if we happen to interact with the nodes by any means. So 4.49, we happen to change this, still 4.49 and 8.73. They do not change. They will always be exactly the same. Keep that in mind. And essentially what we're going to be doing is these guys are going to be representing these 2 things. One, the upper display value is the convergence rate, and the lower display is going to be the connection delay. These are both very important for this module, and this is all going to be what we're going to be focusing on right here. So let's actually start noting this stuff down. I'm going to note down the conversion rates first, being at the top display, and then I'm going to note down the connection delay. So we have 4.49 for this first one. Then we have a 7.92. This one will be definitely a very interesting one. Then we have a 6.61. Then we have an 8.03. And then for the connection delays, we have an 8.73. Wait, did I get all 5 of them? Hold on. 7.92, 4.03. There we go. Totally glossed over that. My bad. Then we have a 9.45. Then we have a 1.36. Then we have a 9.97. And then we have the 6.76. Okay, so now, with this in mind, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at this. So start the training Perceptron by pressing the small display, and in that case, that just simply means that is your submission. So while the module is in training stage, the buttons will be inactive, and when the Perceptron is trained, and we're going to press the small display. So if the training time is less than or equal to the maximum allowed time, and if the required learning accuracy is achieved, the module will be disarmed. So yeah, this is our goal right here. So we need to achieve the learning accuracy, while also making sure that we do not go over this maximum time. That's what we're going to be doing here. And then otherwise you will receive a strike, in which case pressing the small display again to exit the training stage. The module does not reset as far as I'm aware, but it is rather quite annoying if you do strike. I'm not here to teach you how to strike, I'm here to teach you how to solve this module. So here's where we get into the bulk of the work here. This is where we're going to be focusing on what we have to do with calculation-wise. So remember, our goal is to get the learning accuracy while keeping our time as low as possible. And these 2 little formulas right here are going to show us how to do it. So for each pair of adjacent layers, we're going to count the number of connections, and we're going to multiply this by the corresponding convergence rate and remove the fractional part of the result. We're going to add up all the results we obtain, and the result is going to be the learning accuracy. So the convergence rate, as if we remind ourselves, is going to be the top display when we hold these buttons. So now, between this connection, and this is the reason why these buttons are placed like this, between the input connection and the first hidden value, we have a convergence rate of 4.49, but we also have the connection delay of a 8.73. What we're going to do with the connection delay is for each pair of adjacent layers, we're going to count the number of connections again, and we're going to multiply this by the value corresponding to the connection delay and round up. This is very important that you do this. For the convergence rate, we're going to remove the fractional part. For the connection delay, we're going to round up. And then we're going to sub these guys together. And now, there's a little bit of a catch with this one. We're going to multiply this sum by the total module count, and then add the number of indicators multiplied by 300. And then this is the result in training time in milliseconds. Now, if you happen to have, for example, in a full second for the required training time, what's going to be happening is that you would just simply make it 1,000. That's just 1 second is 1,000 milliseconds. So in this case, if it happened to be 1.883, it would simply just be 1,883 milliseconds. That's just the way that works. It's just another way of writing it out. So actually, one of the first things that we can do to make our lives a little bit easier is we can actually just do this process of canceling out. What we can do is we simply do not have to worry about the indicators multiplied by 300 part. While we technically do, we can actually take care of this really quickly right here. So we currently have 2 indicators on the bottom here, and what we have to do is we want to do a 2 times 300, because remember we're going to be adding the number of indicators multiplied by 300. In this case, that gives us 600. And all we simply need to do from this is we simply need to subtract this 883. We need to subtract the 600 from this. Because of the fact that this is going to be adding up to the total time, this is going to be relevant. All we simply need to do is we need to find a range that is going to be below this value. So let's do that. So we have 883 minus 600. So we need our total time, once we're done calculating the nodes, to be under 283. That is the goal here. So we need the sums that we add up, and remember we're going to multiply by the total module count. So for bigger bombs, it might be a little bit trickier. And I will do an example with more than one module on this bomb to demonstrate what I mean by that. However, in this case, we only have one module on the bomb, so all we're simply going to be doing is adding up the sum. But what we essentially want to do is we want to keep our value lower than 283 in this example. So let's start getting into this module here. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to have the way that this module should work is we want high convergency rate and we want low connection delay. So that's going to be essentially what we're going to focus on here. And immediately, right off the bat, what we want to take a look at is a better ratio in this example. And a better ratio means essentially there's going to be a much higher convergence rate and a much lower connection delay. And in this case, this middle example is the prime example right here. This 4.03 over 1.36, that is going to be significantly great for us. And that probably means that we're going to want the full 16 within this range. So, however, keep in mind that there will be consequences for later calculations because what's going to happen is that the amount of nodes that you have in a specific position does affect the more than one pair itself. Keep that in mind, because in this case, we're going to be focusing on the middle pair, but in the same time, we're also indirectly affecting or directly affecting this individual pair right here. So we have to keep track of that, and we have to remember that. So now, here's what we do with this module. And for the most part, this is a pretty straightforward one right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply each of these connections. In this case, we have 16 because there's going to be 4 sets of 4 connections in this case. So it's going to be 16. And we're going to do this to each of these individual percentages right here. So with 4.03, or just numbers in this case. So 16 times 4.03. This is for the conversion rate. And remember, we're going to drop the fractional part of this result. So that's going to be a 64. So we get 64 for the conversion rate. This is part of our learning accuracy. That's a good start, but we're going to need a lot more for this to be successful. So now, let's take a look. So now, for the next bit, we're going to take a look at 16. We're going to times this by 1.36. This is going to be part of our delay, our connection delay. And remember, we're going to round up. So we're going to go up to 22 in this case. It will always be round up. I'm going to put this right over here to simply say that this is what we multiplied right here, and this is the connection that we got if we were to keep this as part of our submission. So now, this means that we already have 64 of the 229 learning accuracy that we need. However, we also lose a little bit of time with this 22 here, but this is actually a really good start right here. We only lose 22, but we gain a lot more in learning accuracy. So that we only lose 22 in our time here. From 283, but we do gain a lot of learning accuracy, which is exactly what we want right here. So now, let's take a look at some of the other cases. And immediately, what also sticks out of my eye is going to be this 8.03 and the 6.76. This could be potentially good right here, but this also does mean that we're going to be getting quite a high thing for the 6.61 and the 9.97 if we were to set this to 4 nodes. That's going to be a bit risky, which probably means that we're going to want to set you to 1, just to make sure that we account for the possibility of other cases here. So let's try and multiply things. So now we have 16 connections between the 6.61 and the 9.97. So let's do the math here. So we have 16 connections in this specific range here. So let's do the math. 6.61 times by 16 is going to be a 105.76. But for the convergence rate, we drop the fraction, so it's just going to be a 105. That's a good part for learning accuracy. However, here's where things get a little bit interesting. This the 9.97 times this by 16. That's going to take a lot of time out of us. That's going to be a 160. That is going to be rather quite nasty. So let's take a look. So far, we already have quite a bit of time lost, but we already have quite a bit of our learning accuracy gained. That's good. So this is probably where this is probably what we want to keep so far. We want to probably keep these two connections as is because of the fact that we gain so much learning accuracy from these two specifically. Now let's take a look at this last one here and let's see if we want to keep it this way. So let's do 8.03 because this is going to be the last little range between these guys and the N outputs. This is going to be 8.03 times this by the 16 connections that we have here times by 16 is going to be 128. We're going to lose the fraction for this example. And then we have 16 times this by 6.76 is going to be 108. This is kind of where we want to be careful here. So this is going to be dropping. This is going to be rounding up, so it's going to be 109. And let's take a look and see what we have for our for what we have so far. We have 22 plus the 160 plus the 109. Now we already messed up somewhere. And this means that we cannot do this. We cannot do what we have right now because of the fact that this is what happens. We have 291 from the connection delays. And what happened here is that we went over the allotted time which we were able to do. Of course, subtracting the indicators. So now what we have to do is we probably want to decrease this guy a lot. Because if we take a look at our learning accuracy here, if we take a look at this, 64 plus 105 plus 128, we significantly go over that learning accuracy. We don't really need that much from this last position. We don't really need that much. So let's probably cut it down in half, and let's recalculate these two positions again because we have a series of different connections now. So now this is going to be 8 connections and 8 connections. Perhaps we can actually do this to a 4 instead. So let's just do 4 and 4. So let's take a step back. Let's get rid of both of these numbers because this is going to be rather quite large for us. Or perhaps we should do 2. I think we can do 2 safely. So let's take a look. So 6.61 times u by 8, because there's 8 connections within this range, is going to be 52. Okay? Then a 9.97 times this by 8 is going to be an 80. We're going to round up, remember? So it's going to be 80. This is already starting to look a little bit better for us. That's perfect. Now, next up, we're going to have 8 here, 8 connections as well. So 8.03 times this by 8, because we have the connections. That's going to be a 64. That's pretty good. And then next up, we're going to do a 6.67 times this by 8 is going to be a 55, because we're rounding up. 55. This is already faring a little bit better. Let's see what our conversion rate is looking like right now, or our learning accuracy right now. So we have a 64 plus the 52 plus the 64. Already very promising. All we simply need from this point on is we need 49 left, which we can probably definitely achieve from this first and second position right here. We need to be careful though, because if we take a look at our position of time-wise right now, we have 22 plus 80 plus 55. We're at 157. We currently have roughly 120, like 5 or 6 left. We want to keep in mind that we want to make sure that we don't go over the 283. And if we take a look at what we have left, the 9.45, that can be a little bit nasty. So that probably means that we're actually going to want to keep what we have so far, in this case representing the 4 connections. Otherwise, we're going to have a different series of problems here. We're probably going to want to change up the amount of nodes that we have here and here. Keep that in mind. Now let's take a look. So in this range, we have a 1 connection of 4.49 and then 1 connection of 8.73. So we're already going to have a 4 and a 9 as our time, as our convergence rate, and our what was I going to say? And our multiplication, our time. So our learning accuracy and our time is currently adding 4, but we're also adding 9. That's rather quite not good. So now, if we were to do 4 connections for the 7.92 and the 9.45, let's take a look. So 7.92, we're going to multiply this by the 4 connections that we have. In this case, it's going to give me a 31. Now, based off of my knowledge, I don't believe this is enough for us. And I believe what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to switch things up a little bit. So, if we take a look here, so we have 4 plus the 31 plus the 64 plus the 52 plus the 64. It just barely does not make 229 as our learning accuracy. So we're going to have to switch things up, which probably means that based off of my instincts, we're probably not going to have 4 here. We're probably going to have something like 3, for example. We're probably going to want to have 4 right here. because that's actually a really good point. The 7.92, that's going to give us a lot here as well. So let's probably put you as a 3 as well. So let's try this again. So now, this is kind of what makes this module a little bit tricky. This can be a little bit brute force as well. But if we were to do this setup, for example, would this work out for us? The thing that kind of scares me, though, is the fact that we have a little bit of an interesting problem. This 4 and 3 range with that 9.45, that's going to make us lose a lot of time real quick, because this is going to be 12 connections right here. So what we want to do is probably, for the sake of it, we might want to make you just 4. We might want to make you just 4, but we're going to be really lax with the other 2 layers here. So we're probably going to make you 1, or we're probably going to make you 2 or something like that. And we're probably just going to make you 1 right here. That is going to be quite heavy. So let's start taking a look. So let's just go from left to right, and let's see if this can potentially give us an answer. So we have 4.49 times you by the 4 that we have here. That's going to be 17, solid start. And then we have the 8.73 times you by the 4 connections that are there. That's going to be a 35. Okay. 7.92. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting. We have 16 individual connections in here. So it's going to be a 7.92 times you by 16 is going to be 126. We just use the fraction. 9 times 4.5 times u by 16. That is rather quite steep. That's going to be 152. This is exactly what I mean by we need to be careful with this. Now we have 8 connections in this next set right here, because there's going to be 2 connecting to each of the individual 2 in the next layer. So that's going to be 8 connections. Now we're going to do 4.03 times u by 8 is going to be 32. Then next up we have the 8 times 1.36 is going to be 10.8, or it's going to be 11 in this case. Okay. Now let's take a look. Let's see how we're doing with our learning accuracy. So we have 17 times 120 plus 126 plus the 32. Promising, but we're going to need a lot more here. So, we might have to take a little bit of a risk here. A tiny bit of a risk. Yeah. So 35 plus the 152 plus the 11. We don't have much time. We do not have much time available to us, and this is going to add up real quick. But I believe if we added 2 here, this might have some possibility of working for us. So now, there's 4 connections between the 6.61 and the 9.97. This is kind of what scares me right here, is that we're going to lose a lot of time real quick. So 6.61 times this by the times up by the 4 connections that are here is going to be 26. Okay, and then we have the 11. The 9.97 times this by the 4 that we have here is going to be a 39. That's going to round up to 40. As I said, this is going to lose a lot of time for us real quick. And then now, with this final connection, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 different connections here. So this is going to be a 8 times 8.03 times u by 8. It's going to be a 64. That should be enough for our learning accuracy, but will this give us enough time? That is what I'm mainly concerned about. 6.676 times u by 8 is going to be a 54. 55, excuse me. Is this below 283 when we sum these guys up? Plus 11 plus 40 plus 55. It is indeed. So now, if we sum up 17 plus 126 plus the 32 plus the 26 plus the 64, it does go over the 229 learning accuracy that we need. And if we add this all up, so if we add up the 35 plus the 152 plus the 11 plus the 4, oh, excuse me, that's not what I want to do at all. If we do 35 plus 152 plus the 11 plus the 40 plus the 55, wait a minute, 35 plus 152 plus 11 plus 40 plus 55. Ooh, I did not do my math right, apparently. We are very close to getting this done, though. So probably what we actually do need to do is we probably need to put this as a 1. So that's my bad. I totally don't know how I butchered my calculations there. But if we do, for example, if we do these last 2 again, I think we can have enough to scale by. So let's do this calculation again. So there's 2 connections in this range, so it's going to be a 6.61 times u by 2 is going to be a 13. Okay. and then 9.97 times you by the 2 here, that's going to be a 20. And then 8.03 times you by the 4 connections that we have here is going to be a 32. I believe that this should be enough for me. And then we have 6.76 times this by the 4 here. That's going to be a 27, 28 in this case. 17 plus 126 plus the 32 plus the 13 plus the 32 barely does not make it. Unfortunate. Really, really unfortunate about that. Okay, so now we're back to the drawing board here. What if we make you a 1, and what if we make you a 2? That might be the solution here. So this is going to affect our calculations from this position right here, but this is going to give us probably enough at this ending position right here. So let's calculate this middle connection right here, the 4.03. This is only going to be 4 connections now. So we have 4.03 times e by the 4 connections is going to be a 16. And then the 1.36 times u by 4 is going to be 5. It's going to be a 6 instead. Okay, and now if we do everything right, these 2 connections should stay the exact same. They should stay the exact same, yes, because we still have 2 connections here. However, we just simply swap the positions here. Now we have 8 connections over here. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's start doing the math for this one. So for the 8.03 and then 6.76, we have the 8 connections. We have the 8 connections there. So now 8.03 times this by the 8 is going to be 64. This is pretty good. This is exactly what we need probably right here. And then the 6.76 times u by 8, remembering to round up for these guys, is going to be 55. Now let's make sure that we did everything correctly. 17 plus 126 plus the 16 plus the 13 plus the 64 does give us over our 229 learning accuracy, but does it fall under the 283 for the time? So 35 plus the 152 plus the 6 plus the 20 plus the 55, it does indeed. Now, if we take this 268 and we add the 600 from the indicators, as you can see, plus the 600, it does indeed fall under the 883 time, and make sure that we remember to multiply this by the sum of the total module count. In this case, there's only 1 module on the bomb, so it's just simply 1. Remember that step. That's very important. I will do that in the second example, but in this case, we have 868. So now, what we should have on the module here is we should get 868 as the time, which falls just below. And then we should have the 17 plus the 20 plus the 126 plus the 16 plus the 13 plus the 64 is going to be 236. This should be the way that it shows up on the module when we hit the training mode. So it should show up as 236 slash 229, and then 0.863, 868, excuse me, and then we have over 0.883. So if we hit this, and just like that, it did exactly that. So all we were essentially doing was some math that gave us the time and the learning accuracy. This module is straightforward what to ask you to do. However, as we just saw in this example, it can be quite tricky to find the answer that you're looking for. But essentially what you want to try and do is you want to try and focus on the area where the ratio is the biggest. In this case, I tended to focus on the 7.92 and I focused on the 8.03. In this case, the 7.92 was not really the nicest example because of the fact that the connection delay was a lot bigger than the conversion rate. However, I was able to focus on this 8.03 example here, and it was able to give us what we needed right there. So let's take a look at one final example. Hopefully this all makes sense. It's a little bit of a weird module at first, but once you understand how it works, you should be hopefully fine. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Oh, I forgot to add more modules. Let me do that real quick. And you wonder why this is 16 points on Twitch plays? It's because of examples like those. That was rather quite not the nicest one, that's for sure. Okay, let's take a look. 1 times, what do we have? Let's just do 2 times tool mods, for example. And the solve status, of course, does not matter. It's not that really important. but in this case, it is module count that matters. Okay, so now let's take a look. So let's see what we have here. So let's just solve these guys, just get it done. And now let's check the indicators first, because the indicators we can get rid of a lot here. So we only have one indicator. So what we're going to be essentially doing is we're going to be subtracting 300 from 852. 852 minus the 300 is going to be 552. This is the number that we cannot go over after we're done with everything. So let's take a look here. Just a second. So let's focus on this. So now, let's get our conversion rates, our conversion rates, and our convergence rates, and the connection rates from each individual point. And as we can see, this example is a little bit different because it starts with two individual inputs and ends only with one. Likewise, with the last example, we only had one input node and one output and 4 output nodes. This is a bit of a different example. Okay. Now, conversion rates, we have 1.89. Okay, not the strongest start. Ooh, here we go. This is going to be a really, really good example right here. This 5.71 is probably where we're going to want to milk this one, definitely. Because of the fact that if we happen to get a 16 conversion rate here, we're going to get a lot of our learning accuracy down. That is perfect. That is amazing. 5.71. All right, this should be hopefully a really bit of a better example here. Where's the button? 9.54. This one could also be good right here, but it is a little bit risky with the 8.66. Definitely. So let's keep that in mind. 9.54. Then 7.42. And then we have 2.74. Now, we pretty much do not want to interact with this last one at all. We want to try and minimize that as probably as little as possible. So that's probably going to end up being a 1. Next up, this is also a really good example right here as well. So that's going to be, these two we're probably going to be using a lot. That's going to be nice. So next up we have 0.63, 0.57. And the reason why these are probably significantly lower is because of the fact that we have more modules on this BUM. Remember that just because these guys are relatively lower does not mean that these that they are exactly going to be what they add up to. Remember that you're going to be multiplying these by the total module count later on. Then we have 0.35. That's a beautiful example right there. 8.78. So already we have kind of 2 points that we kind of want to stay away from as much as possible. That's going to be the 8.66 and it's going to be the 8.78. That's kind of unfortunate that it is right in the middle of this good point right here. However, let's try and find a way to utilize this well. I can already assume that based off of these first 2 points being the fact that the convergence rates are higher than the connection delays, we're pretty much going to be maxing these guys out. Just a hunch. So we can use these to the best of our ability to get as close as 263 as we possibly can. Now, let's remind ourselves that this exists here for the next layer afterwards. So we're probably going to want to set this as something like maybe a 2 or 3, or maybe even a 1 if that happens to be that case. So we have to be a little bit careful with this. So let's just start doing math. Let's just start doing the first 3 layers because those are really good ones, and I think we can confirm that we want to use these as much as we possibly can. So we currently have on the first layer here for the 1.89, we have a series of 8 individual layers here, 8 connections rather. 1.89 times this by the 8 is going to be a 15 because remember we're getting rid of our fraction for the learning accuracy. The 0.63 times this by 8 is going to be a 6 because we're rounding up always. Then we have a series of 16 connections within this 5.71. 5.71 times this by the 16 is going to be a 91. That's a good start. The 0.57 times this by the 16, that is awesome. That is a good one. 10 only for that that individual learner there. So now, this is where things might get a little bit weird. So for this last little bit right here, these last 3 portions, we might want to be a little bit careful, and this is probably where we want to take a look at changing things up a little bit. I think for these first 2 right here, I think we can pretty much confirm that these are going to be both 4 because we want to maximize our 5.71 as much as possible. However, we also need to be careful with this 9.54 and this 8.63. However, thankfully, we do not have that much. And actually, one of the things that we can do is we can actually divide 552. We can simply divide you by 3 to give you a better perspective of what we need to avoid in this case. So we can just do a 184. That's simply the highest point that we can get to. So we probably can actually do a little bit of the 9.54. But we need to be careful that we don't really mess around with this 8.78. This 8.78 is not going to help us out that much. I'm pretty much going to leave that as a 1 for right now. 1 or 2. Now, thankfully, there is only going to be a maximum of 4 different connections within that individual range. That's going to be good for us. However, we want to make sure that we try and just avoid that as much as possible because it's not going to help us for the conversion rate, the learning accuracy all that much. So now, let's just see what we have so far. Let's just try it out and let's see what we can get. So in this case, this is going to be 8 connections right now. So 8 connections, so let's do 9.54 times you by 8 is going to be a 76. That's pretty good. 8.66 times this by 8 is going to be a 60. Is going to be a 70. See how close that is compared to the convergence rate and the learning accuracy and the time that we get. That's very close, and I'm not quite comfortable with that, so that's not good. Now, next up, we probably are going to want to increase this to 3 in some way, shape, or form because this 7.42 is going to do us wonders. So now. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 connections. So 6 times the 7.42 is going to give us a whoa. That's not what I'm looking for. 7.42. If I can get this right, is going to give me a 44. That's going to be nice, but we need, quite frankly, a lot more of this, in my opinion. So we're probably going to want to do some mixing around with this a little bit. Then 6 times this by 0.35 is going to be a 2.1. That's going to be a 3. And then finally, 2.74 times this by the 3 connections within this last little range right here is going to be an 8. And then we have 8.78 times u by 3 is going to be a 20. It's going to be a 27. Now, from eyeballing it, we actually do have quite a bit done so far. So we have 15 plus the 91 plus the 76 plus the 44 plus the 8. However, it is not quite adding up to what we want it to be yet. Now, let's take a look and see what we can do with regards to our time we have left. So we have 6 plus 10 plus 70 plus 3 plus 27. Just make sure I double that. 6 plus 80 in this case plus the 30. Yeah, so we have quite a bit of time left, so we can probably increase this to a 3. We might also want to decrease this to a 2. Just because of the fact that the 8.78. We need to keep that in mind. So, let's do some recalculating. Let's recalculate the 70 and the 76 area, and let's see what we have here. So we have, in this case, now 12 connections. So 12, 9.54 times u by 12 is going to be a 114. That is amazing right there, 114. Now, we're going to do the 8.66 times u by the 12 is going to be 104. Okay? Now we need to be really careful here. So now the connections between this range is going to be 7.42 is going to be now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to have 6 connections now. So 7.42 times u by 6 is going to be a 44. Oh, this actually doesn't change anything then. Because we changed this to a 2 now. So now, if we were to add everything up, and let's actually make sure, hold on, we need to change these, we need to change this guy now. Because there's only 2 connections. 2.74 times u by 2 is going to be a 5. And then we have the 8.78 times u by the 2 is going to be 17, or in this case, 18. So now let's add all this stuff up. 15 plus 91 plus 114 plus 44 plus 5 does give us over our learning accuracy. But now, do we have enough time remaining for us here? 6 plus 10 plus 104 plus 3 plus 18? We do. Okay, so now, let's do what this module wants us to do. So now we multiply this by the total module count for the time here. And then we're going to add the 300 from the indicators. And that's going to be 723 for our time. Or in this case, 0.723. Now, 15 plus 91 plus 114 plus the 44 plus the 5 is going to give us 269. So now this should be what appears on the module when we enter into training mode. 269 over 263, and then 0.723 over 0.852. If we hit this in training mode right now, just like that, everything we just did matches. As always, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions about this module, please do not hesitate to ask. This one is a little bit of a trickier concept for me to explain. But as always, stay crazy, stay cool, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.